a group of friends decided to go camping in a remote forest. They had all been looking forward to the trip for months, and despite the ominous weather, they were determined to have a good time. They set up their tents in a clearing and built a fire to keep warm. As they sat around the fire, telling stories and roasting marshmallows, they heard strange noises in the woods. At first, they thought it was just the wind, but the noises grew louder and closer. One of the friends, Jake, decided to investigate. He grabbed a flashlight and headed into the woods. The others stayed behind, feeling uneasy but not wanting to show their fear. Jake walked for a while, shining his flashlight in all directions. But he couldn't see anything except trees and bushes. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard a rustling in the bushes behind him. He turned around and shone his flashlight on the bushes, expecting to see an animal. But what he saw instead chilled him to the bone. A figure stood there, just beyond the bushes, staring at him with empty eyes. Jake froze, unable to move. The figure was pale and ghostly, with long dark hair that hung in tattered strands around its face. Its eyes seemed to pierce right through Jake, and he could feel its cold presence. Suddenly, the figure started to move towards him, slowly and deliberately. Jake turned and ran as fast as he could back to the campsite, his heart pounding in his chest. When he arrived, he was gasping for breath and covered in sweat. The others could tell that he had seen something terrible. They tried to calm him down, but he was inconsolable. The rest of the night was filled with fear and unease. No one could shake the feeling that they were being watched, and they didn't sleep a wink. The next morning, they packed up their tents and left the forest as quickly as they could. They never spoke of the incident again, but they all knew that what they had seen was real. Years later, when they looked back on that fateful camping trip, they still couldn't explain what had happened in that isolated place in the woods. The memory of the ghostly figure haunted them for the rest of their lives. Emily was walking home from work. She lived in a small town in the countryside, and her walk home was always peaceful. But that night, something felt different. She felt like she was being watched. As she walked, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around, but no one was there. The sound of the footsteps grew louder and faster, as if someone was chasing her. Emily quickened her pace and started to run, but the footsteps kept getting closer and closer. Suddenly, she felt a cold breeze pass by her, and the hair on the back of her neck stood on end. She turned around again, and this time, she saw a figure standing in the distance. It was a woman in a white dress, with long dark hair that covered her face. Emily froze, too scared to move. The woman started walking towards her, and Emily could feel her presence getting stronger. She tried to scream, but her voice was stuck in her throat. The woman came closer and closer until she was right in front of Emily. Emily could feel her breath on her face, but when she tried to touch her, her hand went right through her. Emily realized that the woman was a ghost. The ghostly woman didn't say a word, but Emily could feel her sadness and pain. She stood there frozen, staring into the woman's dark eyes, until suddenly, the ghostly figure vanished into thin air. Emily ran home as fast as she could and didn't look back. She was convinced that what she saw was a real ghost, and she was never the same again. From that day forward, she always took a different route home and made sure to never be out after dark. The memory of that encounter haunted her for the rest of her life, and she never forgot the cold and haunting feeling of the ghostly woman's presence. Lisa had always loved the view from the terrace of her apartment building. She would often go up there to watch the sunset or stargaze on clear nights. But on this particular summer evening, something felt off. As she stepped onto the terrace, a sudden chill ran down her spine. She looked around, but everything appeared normal. The city skyline was aglow with lights, and the warm summer breeze rustled through her hair. But then she noticed a figure standing at the far edge of the terrace, staring out into the night. Lisa couldn't make out who it was at first, but as she got closer, she realized it was a woman in a long white dress, with her hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of black silk. At first, Lisa assumed she was another resident of the building, but as she approached, the woman didn't turn around or acknowledge her presence. She just stood there, staring out into the darkness. Lisa cleared her throat, trying to get the woman's attention. "Excuse me, are you lost?" she asked. The woman didn't respond, but slowly turned around to face Lisa. That's when Lisa saw her eyes dark, empty voids that seemed to swallow up the light around them. Suddenly, the woman started to move towards Lisa, slowly and deliberately. Lisa tried to back away, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. She couldn't take her eyes off the woman, whose face was twisted in a grotesque, inhuman grin. Lisa felt a surge of terror wash over her. She tried to scream, but her throat felt dry and constricted. The woman was getting closer and closer, and Lisa felt like she was about to be consumed by her dark, malevolent energy. Just as the woman was about to reach her, Lisa woke up with a start. She was back in her apartment, safe and sound. But the memory of that encounter on the terrace haunted her for days afterward. She couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was still out there, waiting for her, watching her every move. Lisa became afraid to even leave her apartment, always feeling like the woman in white was lurking just around the corner. In the end, Lisa moved out of the building, unable to bear the constant fear and dread that had consumed her life. But she never forgot that terrifying encounter on the terrace, and she knew deep down that she would never be truly safe again. As Lisa continued to grapple with the memory of the woman in white, strange things began to happen in her apartment. Doors would slam shut in the middle of the night, and she would hear unexplained footsteps and whispers echoing through the halls. One night, Lisa decided to go back up to the terrace in an attempt to face her fears. She felt a sense of dread as she climbed the stairs, but she pushed herself to keep going. As she stepped onto the terrace, she felt a cold breeze whip past her. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she turned to face the edge of the terrace, where the woman in white had been standing before. To her horror, she saw the woman standing at the edge once again, her long hair whipping around her face in the wind. But this time, something was different. The woman was swaying back and forth, her body moving in a strange, jerky rhythm. Suddenly, the woman leaped off the edge of the terrace and plummeted towards the ground below. Lisa screamed as she watched the figure disappear into the darkness. She raced back down to her apartment, heart pounding in her chest. As she tried to calm herself down, she realized that the strange occurrences in her apartment had stopped. The ghostly presence that had been tormenting her seemed to have vanished along with the woman in white. Years went by, and Lisa eventually moved on with her life. But she never forgot that terrifying encounter on the terrace, and she always wondered what had happened to the woman in white. Rumors circulated that the woman had been a resident of the building who had fallen to her death from the terrace years before Lisa had moved in. Some people claimed that her ghost still haunted the building, seeking revenge on those who dared to cross her path. But Lisa knew the truth. She had seen the woman with her own eyes, and she knew that she would never be able to forget the feeling of pure terror that had washed over her in that moment.